Okay, here we are again. This is lesson 9 from the Basic Principles of the Science of Mind, and I will be starting reading on page 123. We shall now devote 3 lessons to the ways of treating for various kinds of difficulties, if and when they appear. Sample treatments will be given so the student will have them as guides to work out his own individual treatments for particular conditions of diverse nature. The student must never forget that we treat the thought rather than the condition. This is because the condition is only the thought in form. Conditions are only effects. Thoughts are the causes. Correct the causes and the effects correct themselves. We resolve the condition back into thought, then we dissolve the thought through treatment. Stomach ulcers. Suppose we start with a physical condition such as stomach ulcers. There is nothing more physical in its manifestations than this ailment, and nothing more mental in its cause. One could persistently treat for the ulcers themselves to heal and see no result. But when one treats for the underlying irritation in the thought, the ulcers heal. False belief of irritation. Ulcers come in that person who has the false belief that something or someone outside of himself has the power to irritate him. The source of his irritation might be members of his family, those with or for whom he works, an environment with which he is not in agreement, the pressure of overwork, financial worries, or any one of a number of external experiences. Nothing can irritate us without our consent. Experiences in themselves have no power to irritate us. It is our reactions to them that irritate. One person may say, "Green and red irritate and enrage me." The other says, "I simply adore red and green." Another says that Mrs. Smith's shrill cackle just drives me wild. Her neighbor says, "Oh, I love to hear Mrs. Smith's merry laugh." Now, if there were some irritating quality in the colors or the laugh, it would irritate all equally. Therefore, the irritation arises within the person and is his irritated reaction to something that is neutral. The person who understands the science of mind knows that nothing in the universe has the inherent power to irritate him without his consent. He therefore withholds his consent. He chooses to hold quiet and steady in the presence of what others allow to irritate them, and he thus remains free from irritation. He who does not understand this is allowing himself to be irritated hourly. We have said that while man thinks with every cell of his body, the cell has no individual intelligence, no power of independent thought. It must take on the thought pattern of the person of whom it is a part. The waves of thought from the brain carried over the network of fine threads called the nervous system are momentarily sweeping the entire body. Therefore, the cell has to think what the brain thinks, and the brain has to think what the person using it thinks. Those successive waves of irritated thought flashing throughout the body begin to impart their irritating nature to the cells through which they pass. Certain organs and tissues seem to be more susceptible to irritation than others. Therefore, the person finds an irritation of the skin or perhaps of a mucous membrane starting to bother him. Sinus trouble that has not been affected by change of climate has often been healed by healing the belief in irritation, as have all the various body conditions that arise from this false belief. Heal the thought, and the body will heal itself. A sample treatment for irritation. A treatment for this condition might be carried on along the following lines. The student may alter it or add to it to suit his own consciousness and the conditions involved. I know that John Smith of 1111 Blank Road, Townsville, is an extension of infinite mind. Therefore, what is true of it must be true of him. Nothing in the universe has the power to irritate or disturb the infinite, for it rests always in a state of perfect peace. John Smith's false belief in the cause of his irritation has produced a bodily irritation. I now speak my perfect word, declaring that nothing in the universe has the power to irritate him, and that he knows this truth to be operating around and within him at this very moment. This new belief makes him quiet and serene in the presence of the most disturbing situations. He is held steady and tranquil by the action of spirit deep within him. Peace is an ever-present reality to him. New brain waves are sweeping over his body. The cells love this newfound peace. They rapidly build themselves according to the perfect pattern. The infinite healing presence fills each cell with so much of itself that there is no room for anything else. I release this word about John Smith, giving thanks for its perfect manifestation before I see it in form. My word decrees it into form, therefore it must be so, and it is so. I'm now on page 125. Practical points in treatment. Name the person. We have said that a treatment is a very definite thing for a definite purpose. We therefore give the name and address of the person for whom we are treating. If for some reason we do not know the address, the name will be specific enough for our purpose. Treat the belief. It will be noticed in the sample treatment that we make little reference to the body. We lightly touch it in passing to indicate the specific condition for which we are treating. But we do not overstress it. Sometimes we use the words, "And I know that every cell of his body knows this truth that I speak and is being remolded according to it." In one sense, there is nothing to heal. The illness lies in the false belief. Buried racial beliefs, the race mind. The human race is only in its infancy. The connection between man's thought and his illnesses has only recently been accepted. If man had advanced to the stage where there was a universal disbelief in illness, there would be none of it for him to experience. Neither would there be any of the other miserable conditions under which mankind labors. But mankind has not yet reached that stage, and so we in the science of mind have to use whatever method that we as individuals can use to separate ourselves from the false racial beliefs and establish a personal belief of the unreality or impermanence of any experience that limits man's freedom. This personal belief is, at present, wildly at variance with commonly accepted beliefs. Therefore, it is not always easy to free ourselves from the drag of the race thought. This should not discourage us, nor should we be disheartened because the race is only starting to climb into spiritual realms. On the contrary, we should be very happy because it has made so much progress in so short a time. One encouraging feature is that the moment our personal belief can be lifted even a little higher, our outer manifestation will automatically rise that much higher. Even if we cannot rise into perfection immediately, we can at least grow in that direction, and there will be enough encouraging demonstrations to keep us moving upward. Spiritual treatment is growing in use each year. It has been estimated that more than 20 million persons in the United States are using it today, and the number is growing. In 25 years, probably 100 million will be using it throughout the world, and the race thought will be correspondingly more positive. Page 126. Recognize that man is the infinite bounded by form. It is important that we see clearly that man is an extension of the infinite, as the inlet is of the ocean. This is to establish a basis of oneness upon which we can base our expectation of healing. The inner world is the world of reality. The outer world is that of the shadow thrown by the inner. There is no doubt that a pain is real to our senses, or that a broken bone is broken, but the infinite never experiences pain or fracture. Therefore, our healing comes to the degree that we can establish our sense of oneness of quality with the infinite, remembering that the infinite is reality and the body is shadow. We repeat that a drop of seawater differs from the ocean only in size. Each drop chemically analyzes the same as the ocean. As far as water is concerned, the inlet in the ocean, the only difference being that it is boundarized into smaller form by shores that are easily seen. Man is the infinite, bounded by form. This we must remember as we treat for ourselves and others, for it is the key to mental and spiritual healing. Man has the seeds of perfection in him, for he originates from a perfect source. His spiritual center is perfect. His healing springs from this spiritual perfect center. Speak with authority. A treatment differs from the ordinary concept of prayer in that we do not abase ourselves, calling ourselves sinners and worms of the dust. We stand upon our inherent dignity as extensions of the infinite. We speak with authority because we know that we reproduce the creative cycle that brought the world into being. And that because of our unique relationship to God, our word could be as powerful as that of God if we could shake ourselves free of the race thought and actually believe with all our hearts that this is so. We do not merely wish or hope for something to happen. We speak our word knowing it will happen. In treatment, there is a decisiveness that is lacking in the older style prayers, which frequently wobbled because the person praying was never sure that what he was asking for was according to the will of God. We have been seeing during this course of lessons that the will of God is anything that enlarges us or our happiness without hurting someone else. It is our duty to determine the integrity of our prayer or our treatment from this point of view. Then, having done this, we can treat with the completest assurance that there is nothing in the universe that wishes us not to have what we speak our word for. Supply. Suppose the problem is one of supply. The person has a false belief of stringency. We do not treat that money will pour into the life of this person, even though that is what he wants, and we want him to have it. In an earlier lesson, we said that in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was dealing with deep underlying beliefs when he came to the subject of supply. He admitted that the people's desire for food and clothing was legitimate, but he tried to show them that if they would seek the giver, the gifts would naturally follow. Spiritual basis for supply. He talked of spiritually conceived supply while their minds were on money. He talked of an inner life hidden within the lilies of the field, which clothed the flowers with an outer beauty. But they were thinking of garments to cover their bodies. He talked of an endless store of supply that had always been present, there to keep the sparrows alive. But they were thinking of loaves of bread. In effect, he said, for the time being, forget those things of sense and seek the inner kingdom of God. Unite your consciousness with that of the giver who has never known lack. Then, as a matter of course, these secondary things will all be added to you. The man who sees loaves of bread and overcoats only, or sees them as the chief end of life, will have to scratch daily for another loaf and another coat. But he who drives past the loaf to the underlying principle of an unfailing supply will quietly know that there will be another loaf tomorrow. In fact, he can produce such a broad abundance that he never thinks of individual loaves. Though this distinction might not seem significant, it is one of the most important we can make for the following reasons. The healing principle is far wider than health, which is only one of its manifestations. The principle of supply is far more extensive than money or food, which are only two of the manifestations. The principle of harmony is universal. Rather than just individual peace of mind, the latter is merely one of its manifestations. Underlying all things, we must find that principle of that thing, that we can apply that principle to 1,000 particulars. The kingdom of God, so often mentioned by Jesus and the ancient seers, is the consciousness of the oneness of God and man, and God's pouring into man all of his abundance. This kingdom is sought by breaking free from the mass view, constantly lifting our thought to its highest levels and seeing God as never reluctant to grant our desires, but rather ever seeking to express a more abundant life through us. It is the putting away of that which is petty, cruel, and censorious towards others, seeing them as also seeking the path to happiness even when they hurt us, forgiving them because they know not what they do, helping them where we can, but never allowing ourselves to be bound by the quality of their thought. I'm now on page 128. Through the apparent to the real. It means the cultivating of our ability to pierce the veil of the material with all its seeming reality and to penetrate to the inner, hidden world of true reality, where all things have their origin and whence all things emerge into the seen world. It means absorption in the contemplation of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence, with all their underlying principles, and knowing that therein lies the true world of causation. It means concentrating on causes rather than effects, knowing that effects will assuredly come once the proper causes are set in motion. It is a movement from the inner side of life working itself toward the outer. It is a reversal of the thinking of the majority, and it produces striking results. This is why we constantly stress the fact that we treat the thought rather than the condition. The true healing is the healing of the thought. The outward healing is the healed thought shadowed forth in this, our less real world of the outer. This is as Plato taught, that the real world is the inner world, the outer world is the shadow thrown by the real world within. Treating for supply. In treating for prosperity, therefore, we do not treat for the $10 bill. We get down to the unfailing principle of supply. To return to our method, again, we start with the fact that man is in the small what God is in the large. We cannot conceive of the infinite as ever being short of anything. Man believes he is short of things because he cannot or does not see the infinite supply. We correct or counteract his false belief. We stress the obvious fact that supply has been constant from his birth, although the channels through which it has come have been many and varied. Starting with the infant's milk, he has had 3 meals a day until now, and he has been clothed and housed. That supply has come through temporary channels such as his mother, his father, odd jobs in boyhood, steady jobs in manhood. In the latter case, some of the companies from which he drew his supply may have gone out of business, or he may voluntarily have left their employ. But no matter for what reason, those channels were temporary. The only changeless thing in this man's whole picture has been supply. He may have thought that the company was supplying him because it gave him a paycheck, but it was only the temporary channel through which this never-ceasing supply was finding its way to him. Since it has been continuous in the past, he can logically expect it to be continuous in the future. There has been no stoppage of supply for the infinite. There has been no stoppage for him. There will be no stoppage for the infinite. There will be none for him. Shall not your Father clothe you, O ye of little faith? Here's the crux. Man's supply never fails from the other side. But because of his little faith, he pinches it into a tiny trickle. He has developed false beliefs in obstruction and delay, and in the difficulty of infinite minds turning invisible supply into visible substance. It is no more difficult for mind to make gold than to make sand or grass, but our belief makes it difficult. A sample treatment for supply. I know that John Smith of 1111 Blank Road, Townville, is in the small what the infinite is in the large. He is forever in touch with an infinite supply of which there can never be any shortage or depletion. His false belief has turned his mind toward channels instead of toward the reservoir. He has allowed his fears to clog up his channels. He has had his mind on the particular rather than on the general, on channels rather than on the fact that supply is never failing, on things rather than on principle. In this moment, I turn away from his financial needs, debts, obligations, where his thought has so long lingered. I turn to the great unchanging principle of supply. I seek for him the inner kingdom of God. I see him united with a never-ceasing flow of good which takes the form of that which he needs in his outer affairs. I speak my word, knowing that his consciousness is now wide open to the resources of the infinite, and that there is nothing in his belief that hinders their flow through him. Opportunities are now presenting themselves to him. Doors are opening to him as his consciousness awakens. People are seeing his true worth, and he is amply and adequately compensated for whatever effort he puts forth. Supply flows through his consciousness easily, freely, copiously, continuously, effortlessly, and manifests itself in his outer affairs. I release this word to that infinite servant that pours supply this day into more than 3.5 billion or 7.9 billion earth dwellers, as well as feeding the countless trillions of lower forms of life from its inexhaustible resources. I've turned to page 130. It controls 1 million worlds in space easily and effortlessly. John Smith's fullest, most copious supply is infinitesimal to it. I therefore give thanks for it even before John Smith and I see it in form, because it is so. An analysis of the sample treatment for supply. The student will notice that we have used the idea of John Smith's true worth and value being recognized. Very often, the person in need thinks only of what he wants instead of what he has to give. No one helps us out of our poverty just because he likes to do so. Our treatment for John is particularly a treatment of prospective employers and customers who will see the worth of John's goods or his services and want to avail themselves of them. The treatment also helps correct John's faulty view, turning it from wanting to giving. Every contract must be equally valuable to the two parties. It is not enough to take pity on John and give him a job. He must have something that is valuable to them, to that employer, or the bargain is unfair. Moreover, John must himself be conscious of his true worth if others are to come into that same consciousness. John's trouble is not lack, but a belief in his worthlessness. He may strenuously deny this, saying that he is a better worker than 9/10 of those employed. But somewhere in his deeper mind, There is always some sense of insufficiency, either unrecognized or unadmitted, which keeps him from richly paid employment. The student must treat this false belief, or John will lose the next job he gets or the next money he saves. Few uninstructed persons know the extreme complexity of their deeper minds and seldom dream of the real causes of their difficulties. The student must treat for them accordingly. Colds. In treating for the person with a cold or similar ailments, it is necessary to know that the wet feet or the drought is only the exciting cause of the trouble. The underlying predisposing cause is confusion, usually accompanied by strong feelings of inner rage and frustration. This is supported by thousands of tests made in hospitals and clinics. It has been found that those causes are often tied in with the love life or with situations involving the emotions particularly. The treatment, then, is not that the cold will leave, but that this particular person is coming into a new experience of peace and fulfillment. In all treatments, the idea of peace, serenity, tranquility should be included, because in all conditions requiring healing, including the physical and the financial, this state of mind will be found to be absent. Therefore, the manifestation of peace in the patient would mean that his trouble has gone. Healing is of the whole person. By this time, the student is coming to see that treatment is not just the waving of a magic wand while he utters a lot of hocus pocus. It requires intelligent use of the laws of thought and clear reasoning, and it involves more than just ridding a person of his current misery. Treatment affects fundamental changes in his way of looking at life. It has been noticed that when a person is healed through the spiritual method of the science of mind, his whole outlook on life is bettered. He becomes a kindlier, more tolerant, more unselfish person who no longer demands that everything shall revolve about him and his wishes. He begins to meet life as it comes with an ability to adjust himself to it, the sign of an emotionally mature, well-balanced person. His thought, as well as his body and affairs, is healed. Thus, the whole man is healed. Okay, page 132. The special helps in study and practical application. These special helps have been carefully prepared to help you get the most out of this course. Questions on the lesson. I advise that you first study the lesson carefully, then put it aside. Write the answers to the questions, and finally, check your answers by the lesson. Keep the answers as a running commentary on the course for your own benefit. At its conclusion, you will find that they have become a record of your own growth in consciousness. Number 1, in spiritual mind healing, what do we treat? And number 2, why do we say that nothing can irritate us without our consent? Number 3, what are the essentials in a treatment for the healing of irritation? Number 4, what are 4 practical points in treatment? Number 5, explain the spiritual basis for supply. Number 6, explain what we mean by the principle of a thing. Number 7, how can we seek the kingdom of God? Number 8, what are the essentials in a treatment for supply? And number 9, why must we put our attention on what we have to give, not just on what we want? And number 10, why do we say that healing is of the whole person? The collateral reading suggestions is Frederick Bales' The Healing Power of Balanced Emotions. Also, Hidden Power for Human Problems, and Your Mind Can Heal You. And by Ralph Waldo Trine, In Tune with the Infinite. And now to page 133. Something here. Practical application, thought training. Practice seeing back of the visible manifestations of the good things of life, the invisible, infinite source. A writing suggestion. Write a treatment for yourself or another person for a specific health condition. Treatment for general good. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want for any good thing. My mind is at peace, for it is the mind of God, and God's mind could never be disturbed. I dare to believe that life is loaded with all the good that I desire. I expect that life is completing itself in me. Streams of energy flow through every section of my body. My surroundings are harmonious. I like the people with whom I live and work, and they like me. I am amply recompensed for all my efforts. I give of my best, and it is appreciated. My chief concern is that I shall be all that I should be this day. I leave the completing of my good to the shepherd, in whose presence I shall dwell forever. And it is so.